And
All right. I
All
love
right.
it. So I'll have to
Great.
hurry up so Paul doesn't miss going back to work. So
no, because it's only the first half, so you're good,
okay. All right.
right? So you're doing the second half. You're the host of the second half.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So turn to chapter
Great.
5, if you would, please. We're going to get through halfway on chapter 5. Announcement for the recording, so people who are watching this later hopefully will hear this as well. Next week, I will be off. I don't usually take a week off, but next week I will be in North Carolina, and there is no internet to speak of where the cabins are. So I'm sorry. I'm going to skip a week. We'll finish chapter 5 in 2 weeks. Okay.
Very good.
So there you go. Clear. You guys have a week off. Yay. All right. All right. So about chapter 5. I like this quote from Martin Luther, pretty big heavyweight, right? In the whole Bible, there's hardly another chapter which can equal this triumphant text. So pretty high praise. If you allow me, I'll do a quick 2-second recap of Romans. Paul makes this proposition statement. God has this way that he's going to save you from hell and that you can be with him forever. To which people might say, well, that's great, Paul, but I don't need saving. I'm fine. And then he spent 2.5 chapters proving to you through every class of human being why this applies to you, that you do, in fact, need saving, that you are going to incur the wrath of God, that everyone has sinned either against the law or against their own conscience, but all have sinned, all have fallen short. We do need the cure. And then he proceeds to talk about the cure being appropriated not by works, but through God's mercy, through grace and grace alone, strictly by faith that God will save me because I can't do it myself. Okay, that brings you up to chapter 5. How about that for a quick recap? Now, you got to love the Bible, even if you didn't buy into what Paul is saying. And Romans basically, from soup to nuts, gives the whole doctrine of Christianity in one book. So it's very, very nice, very convenient, very concise, a consolidated view of Christianity. But even if you didn't buy it and you studied the Bible and you went, nah, you know what, I'm not going to believe that, you would still have to admit something, that the Bible is incredibly unique among all types of holy writings. You can go to other religions and look at their sacred texts, and the Bible's extremely, I'm going to go even further, it's extraordinary in its brutal honesty. If you were trying to get somebody to buy into your religion, you're going to put your best foot forward. Your heroes of the faith are going to remain heroes of the faith, not the Bible. There isn't a single solitary person in the Bible who doesn't do something like a nincompoop or make a knucklehead move or, fall terribly from favor. And the Bible is just brutally honest. And you would also, if you were writing or creating a book of religion, you wouldn't want to tell your followers about all the horrors they're going to face if they sign on. Would you? Is that a great sales tactic? Hey, guess what? You too can be persecuted. Come join. Come on. Who's going to sign up for that? But the Bible is extremely honest. It gives you the pros, but it's not going to pull any punches. And it's very honest about the negatives. And so today we're going to see that. Today we're going to talk about a bunch of different positives, but Paul is very pragmatic and he's going to say, but there is going to be a negative, and he's going to tell you about the negative, and he's not going to pull any punches. So let's go first of all to just simply verse 1 and 2. And we're actually going to spend almost half our time on verse 1 and 2, believe it or not. Well, you probably knowing my gift for gab, you believe it. So, all right, here we go. Therefore, talking about you, having been justified by faith, So you've been justified, not by works, but by faith. Having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom, Jesus, also we have access by faith into this grace in which we stand. And we rejoice in hope of the glory of God. So real quickly, in just 2 verses, Paul mentions 4 benefits. So finally, we get to the benefits. Okay, Paul, I believe you. I know what you're saying about this good news, and I know it applies to me personally, and I buy in. And now he's going to get to, okay, now that you bought in, let me tell you what some of the benefits are. Benefits that the general population will never have, that you gain through faith in the grace of God. And those benefits, just in these 2 verses: peace, access, grace, and hope. So let's start with number 1, peace. Therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God. Stop. Peace. Now note how he says this. This isn't the peace of God that you'll see mentioned in Philippians 4:7. Notice what word he uses here: peace with God. This peace with God is not a feeling of peace. This is a state of peace. This is like 2 nations that were warring, and they declare a truce and they sign a treaty, and there is a state of peace between the 2 nations. Do you understand the difference? The battle between God and you is over. God won, and he won you, and he paid his own with his own life to buy you. The battle is over. This can only come through the Lord Jesus Christ. You can't earn this. You can't work your way up to this. Jesus and his work is our entire ground for peace. As a matter of fact, over in Ephesians, again, in chapter 2, it'll just flat out say Jesus is our peace. He is the reason that we have peace with God. Now, the Bible is very clear here. Ned, it doesn't say you have peace with the devil, because you don't. Ned, it doesn't say you have peace with the world, because the world's going to be against you. Ned, it doesn't say you're going to have peace with your own flesh, because inside of you now sets up a battle between flesh and the spirit, and they'll battle for control of you until the day you die. That's not the peace this is talking about. This is a far more important peace. Life is still going to be a battle for a Christian, but it's no longer a battle with God. You are now fighting for him, not against him. This is huge, guys. Do you get this first benefit? You have peace with God. So, what's your takeaway from that? I'm going to read you something from John Corson, what he wrote on this peace with God. And I quote, "Whether you prayed for 3 hours today or you haven't prayed in 3 months, the war is still over. If you're a believer in what God the Father did for you in sending Jesus Christ to die in your place, you are righteous, justified by faith." End of story. We have a tendency to fall back into thinking that we have to earn something or prove something to our Father. Not so. We can simply relax in our relationship with him, talk to him freely, and fellowship with him continually, because we have peace with him eternally. End quotes. Peace. First benefit. We have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom also we have access by faith. Access. Second benefit. We have access. The way the original Greek is, it's a perfect verb tense. What does that mean? It means you not only had access, but you have access, and you will always have access. This is a standing, permanent position for you. You will always have access to God the Father. Because you're standing before him is not based on works, not based on merits, not based on what you did yesterday or today. It's based simply on grace, his grace. We can stand, we can have peace, and we can have access to God. And it's a permanent position. It cannot be taken away at a moment's notice or at a later time. This access to God, it's like an introduction to the divine presence. It's a lasting privilege. We're not brought to him like he's going to interview you, Marty. It's not like, oh, I'm going to bring Marty in for a little brief interview. No, you're being brought in to remain with him, to be a part of his household, to be a part of his family. And by faith, you'll behold his face and you'll walk with him in the light of countenance. So, peace, access. Now, on this thought, still picking on Marty, let's say Marty, for whatever reason, Marty's a US citizen, perfectly is right. He wants to talk to President Joe Biden. So Marty picks up the phone, calls the White House, information. Hello, this is Marty, and I'd like to speak to Joe Biden, please. What are the probabilities that Marty's going to get through and Joe picks up the phone? He's a US citizen. I don't think the odds are very good, actually. But I guarantee you something else. If Joe Biden's kids want to talk to their dad, I bet they don't have hardly any trouble at all. And it's the same for us, guys. This permanent access that we have, you're his kid. Hey, God, this is Marty. I have a problem. I need you to tell me what to do, or I have a question, or I need some advice, or I need some guidance. Permanent access, he always picks up. You guys understand how huge? Does the world have this? No. Does the world have peace with God? No, they're still at war with God. They're still considered an enemy of the Lord. You're not, and you have access. These are two huge benefits that Paul's hitting on. So let's continue. We have peace, we have access by faith into this grace in which we stand. Third benefit, grace. We have a standing before God in grace. God, what is grace? God's unmerited favor, his undeserved favor towards us. You didn't deserve it, you didn't earn it. It's all him, and he just decides to bless your socks off. This is important, guys. Grace, and we talked a little bit about this. I think Steve asked this question. It was a really good question last week. We stand before God through grace, and we think in terms of, well, that's my salvation. I get it. I'm saved by grace. I get it. It's not only the beginning principle of the Christian life, it's the continuing principle of the Christian life. We stand, again, is in that perfect tense, that verb in the perfect tense. It means we continue to stand in grace eternally, permanently. It's a continuing sort of relationship. Pause 1 second. I don't need it. I got somebody else to cover it. Sugar just got home. Now, many Christians begin in grace, but they think they've got to go on to perfection. If you remember Steve's question from last week, they go on perfection and maturity by dealing with God on the principle of the law. Do you remember? Not so. I was going to point, Steve, to a couple of verses, but in Galatians 3:2-3 and Galatians 5:1-4, Paul specifically addresses this. No. We do not continue on in grace through following the law. We continue to get closer and sanctified. Being more like Jesus has nothing to do with following the law. It's all about grace. You don't deserve his blessing even after you're his kid. You just simply receive it because he's a good father. Now, what does this mean to you? What's the practical application? You have peace, you have access, you have grace. Well, standing in grace means that, Lee, you no longer have to prove that you're worthy of God's love. If that ever hits you, that's a trap, and that's not from God. You never have to prove that you're worthy of God's love. Standing in grace, you know he loves you. You're his kid. Standing in grace, Lee, means that God is your friend. You are literally a friend of God. Standing in grace, Lee, means that the door of access to you, to your Father, is always open, permanently open. And this was a good one for me. Lee, standing in grace means that you can take that scorecard that you always look at your offenses and beat yourself up over and throw it away, because God settled that scorecard and credited righteousness to your account and wiped out everything you did past, present, and future. Get rid of the score sheet mentality. And finally, standing in grace means I can spend more time praising God and less time hating myself. Okay? So standing in grace, really big. And then he finishes just verse 2 by saying we have access by faith into this grace in which we stand. And what's the result? We rejoice in hope of the glory of God. Now, the word hope here, obviously, the way we use hope, it can be two different meanings, but they're as different as an orange from an apple. Okay. I can say, Ken, I hope that you sing really well in your Christmas concert this year. Okay. But Ken could get laryngitis. I think one year you got sick or you got hoarse. I remember something happened and we were praying for you about that. We hope that Ken can sing really well, and that's hope. It's like, well, that's something I'm wishing for and hoping the best for. Then there's the way Paul uses hope in this passage, and that is, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is perfect. He's just, he's right, he's true, he's flawless, and I can take hope in that certainty. That certainty can undergird me, and no matter what I'm going through, I know I don't ever have to question God's goodness, God's rightness, God's mercy. That hope is a certain hope. It's a condition that allows you to look up and be optimistic about something and have a positive attitude about something, because you know at the core issue, there is no doubt that this is true. Two different ways of using the word hope: uncertain and certain. So let's return the orange and the apple. So the way he's using rejoice in the hope of the glory of God, this is a logical conclusion to peace, access, and a standing of grace. Hope never implied uncertainty to Paul, the way he used it. J.B. Phillips, one of the scholars that I read to prepare these things, translate hope as happy certainty. It undergirds a believer and lifts him up and says, I know this to be true, so therefore, no matter what I'm going through, I have this kind of certain happy hope. It's a hope that empowers you. It's not wishful thinking. It's done, it's decided, and I can now go through anything because I know what the outcome is going to be. Do you guys understand the difference between the apple and the orange? And that kind of hope brings joy, Paul says. Rejoice, he says, because I don't need to sweat it. A Christian should have this kind of certain hope the way Paul is using it. Why? Because no matter what happens to you in this life, your outcome, your destiny, your ultimate location has already been determined. And you can't muck it up. Oh, you can try. And you know, as they say, get them by the skin of your teeth. But no, your destination is assured. You're a king's kid. You just need to start acting more like a king's kid. You need to start acting like royalty. So All we did was go through 1 and 2. Do you guys get that? Peace, access, grace, hope. 4 benefits. 4 benefits. Now, verse 3 and 4. Paul isn't going to shy away. He's going to say, but, however, you're going to have trials. Now, who on earth better knew about trials than Paul? If you're even vaguely familiar with the stuff he went through, beaten, whipped, shipwrecked, bitten by snakes, flogged, stoned, eventually was probably beheaded in Rome for his faith by Nero. The guy knew trials. The guy knew tribulations. He had a price on his head. The Jews couldn't stand him because they felt he was a traitor to their cause. So he knew trials. Here's what Paul writes, verse 3 and 4. Very honest. Following Christ has these benefits, but it doesn't avoid trials. He says, not only these 4 wonderful benefits you get, but look what he does with trials. He makes a positive out of it. Not only these benefits, but we also glory in tribulations. This meaning he's setting Christians apart from normal folk. But we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulations produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. So he doesn't shy away. Paul's not an idiot. And please don't take this in a stupid direction. Ron, you are not supposed to go out and actively pursue tribulations and trials. Gee, I wonder if I can go get infected by COVID today. Man, that would be great. Because look at what tribulations and trials are. Paul says they're a benefit. No, tribulations and trials are part of the curse. They come. But Paul says to a believer, one of the benefits of being a believer isn't to escape trials and tribulations, but rather God thwarts the enemy, his plan for you to make you suffer and be miserable and hopeless. And he turns it on his head and goes, I'll even use trials and tribulations for good. This is a hard one, guys. We're all going to probably face this. If we haven't faced it in the past, probably face it multiple times in the future. All humans experience trials. Paul is not trying to sell you a bag of goods here. Christians are no different. All human beings experience trials. It's universal. But for the Christian, it's not pointless and it's not cruel. Trials are allowed by God, but they are used by God for some kind of ultimate good. He takes something that's clearly evil and broken and makes something good come out of it. Trials for a Christian have a purpose. They are not pointless. Now I'm going to spend a little more time on trials because we all have them, but do you get this much what Paul is saying? He's not saying trials are good, but he's saying trials will come. And for a Christian, even something that the enemy has intended for bad, God can turn it on its head and use it for good. And he's going to tell you, it's not pie in the sky. It's not, oh, well, I'll never know what good came out of this. Well, you may not know what other good it does for other people, but he's going to tell you, oh, I'll tell you what trials do for the Christian. They're going to build perseverance, which is another word for endurance. And with that perseverance, they'll build character, and then they'll build hope. It's this progression. Paul anticipates that a detractor would say, oh, Paul, these 4 benefits you give us, you're too pie in the sky. Paul knows, no, I know we're going to have many tribulations. I'm going to have tribulations. You're going to have tribulations. He's not sprinkling out spiritual platitudes here. Tribulations in the original language, he used a very strong term in the Greek. It doesn't refer to minor inconveniences. Jim went to pull up today to Publix and he couldn't get a good spot. Man, he had to park 12 spots out. What a trial. That's not what Paul's talking about. He's talking about real trials, sickness, disease, injury, relationships fractured, financial calamities. He's talking about real trials. And he says, you know what they do for a believer? I don't know what they do to an unbeliever. Many times they do terrible things to an unbeliever. Depression, suicide. You know what they do for an unbeliever? He says, first thing they do is they build endurance. Let's say Bill hates to read. Now, I know this isn't a true statement because I get his emails and I can clearly see he loves to read. But I don't sit still that well, so I'm not a big reader. I read short articles and news things and snippets and whatnot. But to sit down and read, I forget what you, the Jewish historian Josephus' works. Bill's a big enough nerd where he's read that book. Okay, Bill, I'm never going to read that book. I'm just going to tell you, you send it to me all you want, but I'm never going to be able to sit still. My fanny won't be in a seat long enough to do that. But let's say Bill hates to read. Okay. But for a reason, we don't even need to know the reason. He has to learn how to read and read well and read volumes, maybe studying for a degree. And it requires that he plows through just volumes and volumes of material. Now, that's not going to be easy for Bill. Would you agree? He hates to read, but he starts the process and it's painful and it's ugly and he grumbles and he complains and he gripes, but he gets through the first volume and the second volume goes a little bit faster. His reading comprehension picks up, his speed of reading picks up. By the time he's in his third and fourth volume, he's got a rhythm, kind of a discipline. When he knows he's sharpest, how many cups of Starbucks he needs before he begins the process, and he's got a flow going about him. And Bill gets his degree. And he looks back and he realizes, I hated reading, but reading over and over and over again built in me endurance, perseverance. And it developed in me something that now is a character trait. Bill likes to read. All right, let's say, let's say Marty was a long-time runner. But what you didn't know is Marty in high school was 400 pounds. And they didn't stuff him in lockers because he wouldn't fit. This is also not true. All right, so as an adult, Marty just takes it upon himself. I gotta get this. This is killing me. I gotta get this weight off. So he starts walking. He hates it. Heat of the day in Florida, humidity, bugs, you name it. He gets halfway out, rains on him. It's just awful. But he keeps going. The next day, he hurts. His joints are sore. He has to take ice baths. He smells like liniment all the time, icy hot. Everybody knows Marty's coming into Publix from a mile away, but he keeps walking. And then the walk turns to a slow jog. And then over a process of months, he begins a little bit of a trot. And before long, Marty shed a bunch of weight. He's down in the low 200s, and now he's motivated. He starts paying careful attention to what he's eating. He's out diligently on his runs. And then who knows, Marty's competing in a 5K at a local 5K to benefit the Rotary, and he wins his age group. Marty is now a runner. He has a character trait, and it was built through endurance. And the endurance was built through a lot of tribulations. Anybody that's ever run and doesn't like running, you know what tribulation means. You could take weightlifting. Same thing. It's not fun. It's awful. And when you first start out, it's really awful. But if you keep at it more and more and more, and it clicks, then at some point in the future, you're a weightlifter. And you look back and you're glad you went through these things. Do you guys get what Paul is saying? Tribulations are not necessarily good in and of themselves. It's what God does with them that's good. He builds character. I know I went off on a radical rabbit trail on that. It's part of your Christian life to incur tribulation. You should have the right attitude when tribulation comes. You should know that God uses tribulation in your life to build endurance, and he uses endurance in your life to build character. And God knows how much, the Bible is very clear, he knows how much you can take. He carefully measures the tribulation you face. And if it's any consolation, if it's any solace, know that everybody faces tribulation. It's not just you, the poor Christian, getting beat up. It's everybody faces tribulation. Listen, I've said this a million times, bears repeating. Crap happens. You can put it on a bumper sticker. Crap happens. We live in a fallen world, and guess what? We broke it. But God can even use the negatives in this life and cause good for them to happen for believers. Now, again, don't be a fool and go out and seek trouble. I'm not saying that. Each day will have enough trouble all on its own without you going out trying to provoke something. But just rather, when it comes, know that God is in control. I know I've got about 2 minutes before the break. I've heard people say, don't pray for patience. Whatever you do, don't say, oh God, I don't have any patience. I need God to. Don't pray for patience, because God will send you trials to give you patience. Maybe the right way to face that is, you know what, God, if you need to send trials my way so I learn patience, then I guess you got to send trials my way, because I need to learn patience. Our flesh cries out against this, yet we know this is true. So trials come, we learn endurance, and if you repeat that over and over and over again, it turns into character. And what's properly trained, trials, here's the key, here's what Paul's getting at, here's the benefit. Once properly trained, trials will no longer defeat you spiritually or emotionally, because with this new character, you are trained to have certain hope. And that's the last piece. Perseverance, character, hope. It's a golden chain of Christian growth and maturity. One virtue builds upon another as we grow to be like Christ. So what does all this get you? Certain hope. So we're going to take a break. Thank you, Paul, for covering me on this first half. Everybody sign off and then sign right back in as soon as possible. We're only going to go through verse 11, so we're more than halfway done now. I will see you back here in a few minutes.